Hej.
En liten apparat, som ett lysrör, som kan sitta på dörrkarmen och skanna av kroppen när man kommer in och som ger ifrån sig en signal om det finns någon fästing på kroppen. En fästingskanner helt enkelt. Det hade varit bra om den också hade en funktion där den plockade bort fästingen och förstörde den. Och då slipper man ju signalen.
Tällainen onnilagan vuori jorgoleji reidu. Sulliakar puolusturusajjan ja mä saatan väljuvusta itolla. Ja tämä takkiviri jorgolu kurigili faldahto. Don saatan maina ja dollan jalmevusta ja huuman keva kurigili faldahtosa.
Vél til að stýra tímanum. Hæja á hraðanum þegar þú þarft meira á honum og auka hraðan þegar þið leiðist.
Good morning, everybody. Dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Anne Glover, who will be today's opening ceremony keynote speaker, the Chief Scientific Advisor to the President of European Commission. Anne studied at Edinburgh University and obtained her doctorate in molecular microbiology at the Cambridge University, where she became a lecturer and a professor. Her area of research has particular relevance to how we age and how we respond to artificial stresses such as chemotherapy. In 2008, Anne was made a woman of outstanding achievement in science, engineering, and technology, and has worked hard to raise the profile of women in SET. As few of you may know, Anne played an important role in establishing and supporting Scotland's premier science centre, our Dynamic Earth, in Edinburgh. And I have to confess you that quite recently, while visiting Warsaw, Anne regrettably missed the opportunity to visit the Copernicus Science Centre. But later she admitted it was an obvious mistake, and she promised me to see the Science Centre or a museum in every city that she will visit. 2006-2011, just before she became a first Chief Scientific Advisor to the President of European Commission, she served as a first Scientific Advisor for Scotland. And in February this year, she has been appointed to chair the newly created Science and Technology Advisory Council for President Barroso. So please keep in mind when President Obama asks you whom to call in Europe to discuss the top scientific issues, don't forget to give him the card of Anne, Professor Anne Glover.
Robert, thank you very much. And also, it's an absolute pleasure and a delight to be here. And the first thing I'd like to do is just to congratulate the organisers of the conference. And also, I think, congratulate Sweden. It is not often you come to a conference and your face is in a broad smile before you even come into the auditorium. So I have to say, well done. My days don't normally start like this. So thank you very much indeed. As Robert said, I've actually always been interested in how you communicate science. And this started for me as a PhD student, where one day my supervisor, who is a very nice man, and always had an open door policy. So when you went in to talk to him, the door was always open. And one day in my second year of my PhD, he called me in and he said, "Close the door." So I panicked because I thought that I've obviously done something really serious. And he sat me down and he said, "I'm just going to say something to you, and I don't need you to comment. I just want you to go away and think about it." And he just said this. He said, "Research not communicated is research not done. Now you can leave," and leave the door open. And actually, I've never forgotten that. It doesn't even matter if it's research or whatever you do in life. If you don't communicate it, you have wasted your time. And for me, Ecsite, this European network of science centres and museums, is absolutely exemplary in being able to learn from best practice, to think about what we can do, and more importantly, to allow people to share. Because I feel very lucky indeed that I work in the life of science, because it almost makes you feel guilty each day if you go into the lab and you can do whatever you want. You can let your imagination determine what you do in a day, which is really quite unusual. And we don't share that enough. And we have a danger, and I was at a conference yesterday where a representative of Science Europe commented that she thought that citizens nowadays were almost just a spectator to change. And we have to do something about that, because science is culture. And let me just give you a few examples of that. One of the things that marks us out as humans is that we are incredibly curious, that we're always questioning. So if we go back many centuries on the left, where we were kind of peering out of the firmament and looking into our universe, our imagination curious then, to today, where we might use something like the Very Large Telescope to examine our universe, to be curious about what we can't touch, but we can imagine. And science is what makes us the species that we are. Many species use tools. Many species are aggressive. There are lots of things you can say about the species on our planet. But humans really are remarkable in our ability to transform our imagination into reality. And that's something quite special. But we do lose something if we don't share that more broadly. And for me, that is a danger in the 21st century. And I mentioned that science is culture. It's just as much culture as poetry, dance, literature, sculpture, art, filmmaking. Wherever you go, these are important things. But I would argue to you that science is the most creative thing you could do with your life. But how often do we express that feeling to young people? How often do we persuade our politicians that it's the most creative thing that we can do, and the thing that can have the greatest impact for our fellow citizens? It pushes back the frontiers of knowledge, and I'm just using some random images. I can't compete with the opening ceremony, but I'm not Swedish, I'm only Scottish. So if you look at the things in terms of our knowledge, we can go from the very big, the macro scale universes, to the very small on the bottom right-hand side, where in the 21st century we celebrate creating here on Earth a machine that has allowed us to recreate a fractionth of a second just after the Big Bang when our universe was created. How utterly amazing is that? And it should give us confidence, and should give all ages, young people right the way through to the very old, it should give us the confidence that there isn't a problem that we cannot solve by using this creative force, if we can only harness it and we can engage with people more broadly. So science can be used to help us. I know that sometimes science is also used to hinder us. But what we need is the balance, and the balance comes from a democratic engagement in science, and this is where you all come in, because it is difficult. Many of us seem to sleepwalk through what's happening, and technology, which we use very commonly, becomes somehow invisible. And although we use it, we don't understand it, we don't seek to understand it, and we don't challenge it and ask, well, what more could it do for us? And I very much liked in that opening ceremony where there were all these possibilities, what if? And it would be, for me, very important, but also a tremendous stimulation for scientists. If citizens demanded, actually, when you're in the lab, I'd quite like you to look at this for me. I particularly like the one about chocolate, but, you know, that's a personal thing. Science provides us with evidence. It provides us with a meaningful way to do things that have positive impact for us. And having said that, I'm aware this slide is all about banning things, but science is also all about enabling things. So if we have a new compound and it has a potentially positive impact, how do we see that it will not have any unexpected consequences? The use or translation of knowledge into a body of evidence, which we as citizens can then interact with, which we can challenge, and which then we can empower. And we should never forget this. Politicians do nothing without us. We empower them because we put them there. And so they must do what we wish them to do. So if we as citizens want them to embrace more evidence, if we want them to use the unbelievable knowledge that we generate for the benefit of global citizens, then we must demand that. But that again is all about communication. Here's more communication. And I put this up just because it's the unexpected power of science. It's interesting to me that if you look at the political relationship between, say, North America and North Korea, I think an understatement would be it's not good. Okay, there's not much common understanding there. And while there are lots of very angry exchanges, where there's escalation of aggressive comment between two philosophically different cultures, at the very same time, North Korean scientists are going to North America. North American scientists are going to North Korea. They talk quite happily, because a true international language is the language of science. You can talk that anywhere in the world. It has unparalleled power from that point of view. And a lesson I learned from a very wise woman some time ago was that she said, when you want something in life, let me offer you some advice. And she said, never ever back someone into a corner where there's no way out, because you'll never ever win your point of view. Always leave them with a way out. And for me, science diplomacy is always leaving the door open. Because if we're talking about knowledge, if we're talking about the excitement of generating new ideas, that's the basis that we can maybe come to common understanding. So you might be getting the idea now that I think science can solve everything. I'm not so naive, but I think we miss an opportunity if we don't continually remember the power of generating knowledge, the excitement and camaraderie of doing this in collaboration. And of course, science more than almost anything else now is truly collaborative. There's another thing for me that science really illustrates, and that is that science is all about risk. So every day when you go into the laboratory, for me, and I'm still a working scientist, although I admit I have very little time now to do it, but we still are active in our research laboratory, or at least the people that work with me are active in the research laboratory. And every time they come up with a hypothesis, they think about an experiment, there's a risk they were wrong, and it won't work the way that it's expected. But that never puts anyone off, because the reward is unparalleled. And I think too often in our society, it's another thing we don't translate very well, the relationship between risk and reward. So all of you took a big risk in coming here today. And I mean a mortal risk. You could have been run over on the way here, had a very bad accident. All sorts of things could have happened to you. But you made a judgment that the reward, meeting all your colleagues, listening to the presentations in the conference over the next few days, that would be a much better reward than having stayed home in bed. And actually, I should also just mention that most people die in bed, so it's not a good idea to stay there. I'm teasing the facts a little bit here, but so science is risky, and it's something that we embrace. How about that we share that more widely with people? Because I think nowadays, partly because of this vacuum in which people live, where we are insulating them from new knowledge, the excitement of discovery, that they feel they should live in an environment with no risk. And that will never be possible, and I would argue never even desirable. You must balance risk and reward. Science delivers so much for us. It gives us jobs. That's really important. And not only that, very interesting jobs, either directly or indirectly. And it does allow us, and the theme of this conference, all about dreaming. It's amazing to me that as a human species, we can dream and imagine, and then using the tools of scientific discovery, we can translate into action and impact. That really is something very special, and it's real impact. Science changes people's lives. So I look at this wonderful audience, and I realize actually a century or two ago there would be a lot fewer of you here, because many of you would simply have died from microbial diseases, would have been one of the most common causes of death. And medical science has given us the opportunity to address that. We've still got challenges, because now we're becoming increasingly resistant, or many of the infectious diseases are becoming resistant to the antibiotics we use. So it needs more imagination to think about how we keep ahead of the curve. Science also invents the future, and so here's a purely personal remark, and some people say I should be ashamed of this, but I really like Star Trek. So I can remember certainly in the 60s when Star Trek was first broadcast, in our home, because then there were no DVD recorders or anything, my mother and I would not leave the home if there was an episode of Star Trek. Okay, that's quite sad, but there we go. And one of the things that was interesting was, for me, all the gadgets they had in Star Trek. And so here's our communicator. That's the one on the left. The one on the right you might recognize, because this is how we communicate. And actually, for those of you who really don't have a social life, look back through episodes of Star Trek and look at all the gadgets that they used and now identify their real-life equivalents, because honestly, they exist. It's amazing, even to the point of view of teleporting. Admittedly, not with whole humans, but we can do it with molecules. So science challenges our brains. So here's Erno Rubik, who invented this wonderful Rubik cube. but also, I suppose, alerted us to puzzling and thinking about systems and how we use them. And also, just looking at this, it is also just fun, isn't it? Trying to solve our Rubik Cube. It lends some mystery to our lives. So a lot of us do live in a world with substantial routine. And it's great to be challenged by mystery. Because I don't need to say this to you, I guess life is really short. And there's no excuse for not packing as much as you possibly can into it. And engaging in mystery is one of the most exciting things, not just that we can do personally, but I guess that you professionally can offer to others, things that they would not have expected. And I mention here that science is stunning. And for me, I'd have to say the Large Hadron Collider. And I'm a biologist, so, this is... other biologists say to me, I'm letting the side down by giving such publicity to high-energy physics. But this is truly amazing. You don't get an idea of scale here, but this is the Atlas detector, very well named, which detects some of the tiny fragments which are generated when ions collide together almost at the speed of light in an environment which is colder than space that we create underneath Geneva on our planet. And when we do that, what we've generated, and let's just celebrate it for a moment, we've started to understand the fundamental nature of matter. And many of you might think, oh, I think I understand that already. I didn't need this massive accelerator to do that. It's really not true, because I'm standing here at this lectern and I'm hitting the lectern now, and my hand is not passing through it. You'll notice that. Yet the lectern is 99.99% nothing, as is my hand. There is nothing there, and yet it's not going through. So there's something giving this mass, and that's what we've discovered some insight into at the Large Hadron Collider. Why does it make any difference to the citizen walking past outside this conference hall? Because if we understand the fundamental nature of matter, then our ingenuity is such that we could possibly manipulate that. And I mean manipulation in a positive way. So we could take something, and I'll just give it a go. Okay, I'm trying to lift the lectern now. It's not working. But let's say I could convert this lectern, which is many kilos, into just a gram. Then, of course, I could lift it just with one hand, and I could transport it with very little energy. This would be a good thing on a planet that is moving towards 9 billion people with limited resources, particularly of energy. So there's always a way, using imagination, to translate possibilities. And just to remind you, on the way from first imagining being able to recreate fractions of a second after the Big Bang, to realizing it in the 21st century, we have also delivered to the world the World Wide Web. We've delivered the possibility of using antimatter, positrons in positron emission tomography to be able to non-invasively scan the human body, and all sorts of other things. Delivering the unexpected was probably the real joy of what happened at CERN. Science is also hands-on, and I don't think you'll disagree with me with this, but there's a lot of scientists still disagree and say, don't tell people science is fun. And I'm never quite sure why not, because in my own laboratory, people hardly stop laughing, and that's because they're having a very good time. It's always been like that. And the other thing that we need to do is we really need to do a bit of an image makeover for scientists. Because if I say to people, and I'm a strong supporter of all the science centres in Scotland, there are 4 of them, and I was at Glasgow Science Centre once, and I know that there are colleagues from Glasgow here, and I was speaking to some children at the Science Centre, and there was a door over there, and I said, okay, so behind the door there's a physicist. Describe the physicist to me. Well, It was a man. He was wearing a white coat. He had mad hair. He had thick glasses. This is really bad. He didn't smell so good. And also, he wore rubber boots. Now, I don't know about you, but as a young person, if I thought, will I go into a career in physics or perhaps a landscape gardener or something, I think I'd go for the landscape gardener. You know, you're not going to get many friends looking like that image. But that's not. Scientists are the most imaginative people that you could meet. If you were going out on a date, who would you want to go out with? One of those imaginative ones or just a dull, ordinary one? Apologies to all other professions here. But you get the point. We don't talk about this enough. So science is fun. It allows you to use your imagination. It allows all sorts of opportunity. If we are to be successful in Europe, then we need to encourage all our smartest young people at least to consider a career in science. Of course, they won't all be scientists, but I would like them all to be scientifically literate. I'd want them to be questioning, demanding, engaged, enthusiastic about the knowledge that we generate, because that would make the world of difference for Europe. And not just Europe globally, because Europe has a global leadership role. So the image is crucial. So here are some of the images. I admit I'd be curious about the guy on the left, and I'm not sure I'd want to spend an evening with him. But I think you get the idea. Our image is crucial. And so allowing people, particularly in our science centres and our museums and our institutes, allowing people to interact with people who are obviously interesting, fun, and exciting is important. So the last thing is that we do need, particularly I focus in on myself now as a scientist, we need to get out of our ivory tower. And on the left-hand side, this is, and I should apologize, I'm unable to stay long at the conference, and I have to go to Potsdam. And in fact, this is the ivory tower at Potsdam, which is reputed to be Einstein's ivory tower, which was built for him, and he used to go in there and contemplate. So, lucky man, I would like a bit of solitude as well. But actually, it's no good being in an ivory tower. We need to turn our backs on that. And what we need to do is we need to think about how do we get the knowledge that is generated, so much of it, and how do we make it accessible, useful, interesting, and more importantly, transformational for our citizens. I wish you the very best for your conference, and I look forward to hearing what you do and actually also feeling the impact of what you do as well. Thank you very much indeed.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Hi, I'm Karina. I'm the CEO of Universium, hosting this year's Ecsite conference in a great and important collaboration with this region's 5 other science centers, Navet, Innovatum, Dalenium, Baltasar, and Molekylverkstan. We all together welcomes you here to Gothenburg and to Dreams, the spirit of innovation. Our tomorrows need new and different solutions today. So let us all challenge each other this week to dream new dreams and to foster our curiosity and to spark innovation into all our areas of operations. Now, here's a story that sparked my dreams and my spirit of innovation. A couple of years ago, there was a high school student in the US who came up with a possible cure for cancer. You probably heard of her. Her name is Angela Chung. Only 15 years old, in her spare time, and never having been introduced to research, she formed her own advanced science project. She took an interest in doctorate levels papers in bioengineering. She talked her way into the Stanford labs And she started her own research and in her very own way. And she said it almost became like a puzzle when she decoded a since long known scientific problem. And here's what she did. Angela Chang, she developed a method for releasing targeted drug with a very high precision. It involved infrared zapping, if you'd like, of a drug attached to a cancer cell. It would then release itself where it would affect only the disease, leaving the healthy cells unharmed. Now, successfully tested on mice, her method shows great promise. And don't you think that's amazing? I do. And some people would argue that despite her age, she got it right. But maybe, just maybe, it was because of her age that she succeeded. I believe our hope for the future is in the use of the rich capacity of the youth. And I think we science centers and museums can be a very powerful source of good and a true resource for the society. If we together can spark the children's dreams, fuel their capacity for innovation, they will become important agents of change and help develop a better future for the world. One person that has been inspired and has had her dreams sparked by our work, our science centers, is Matilda Larsson. She's a 16-year-old who is deeply interested in science and technology. Next year, she will start a senior high school where she's chosen the scientific program. And her interests, they vary from stamp collection, Doctor Who, to robots. And so, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I'd like you to be inspired by Matilda. Please enter the stage.
Hello, and welcome to Gothenburg. I was born about 150 kilometers from here in a town called Skövde. I grew up there at the science center called Balthasar, and it's much thanks to that science center that I'm actually standing here today. And don't worry, this will not be a cutesy, we are the future sweet kid speaking to you. In fact, I do not think I am the future. I am here and now, a 16-year-old girl who will start high school this autumn and who loves science and technology, and of course science fiction. Just like you did, and still do, I have dreams. And in the process of developing those dreams, science centers have played a huge part in my life. To me, going to the science center has always been a natural thing to do. I can't remember exactly the first time I went there, but I do know that the first couple of times I was there with my class in school, so I must have been about 6 or 7. And I remember that everyone in my class thought it was one of the best days ever, because we were allowed to both learn about science and play at the same time. And I think that this, learning and having fun at the same time, is what science centers are all about. And sure, I've been blessed with having a wonderful science teacher, but no matter how good you are as a teacher, it's difficult to step away from those normal restrictions of teaching. In school, it's about learning facts and proving that you understand information that you've been given. And that's why we need science centers. We need those wonderful bridges between formal learning and informal exploration in order to help us grow. And that's why Balthasar has been such an important place for me to be. I wasn't joking when I said that I grew up there. And for me, it's always been a natural place to hang out and talk with other young people. Now, I'm a part of a reference group and spend my Wednesday afternoons there speaking English with other teenagers with the same kind of mentality as I've got. And yes, I've got dreams, but I've also got 2 feet on the ground. Dreaming is one thing. Actually reaching for them and achieving them takes a bit more. Young people today always want to know why we need to do something. And of course, this is because teenagers are questioning in general. But at least here in Sweden, it's mostly caused by the fact that we are taught so many things in school without no one ever telling us why we need to know them. And the truth is, often the teachers themselves don't know why. And this is where science centers have got a huge advantage that schools doesn't have. You have much greater and better possibilities to teach young people about things that are important to know in real life. Things that can inspire someone to understand that science and technology is so much more than just reading textbooks and writing assignments. You're all in a fantastic position to help young people to reach their dreams. Make use of that possibility and inspire teenagers and children to do something meaningful and creative with their time. Something interesting that they will have use for in their lives. Thank you for listening.
No, the work that we do could not be achieved without the support, the active support of important stakeholders. And the work that we do here in Västra Götaland, the Universium and the other five science centers, could certainly not be done without the support that we receive from the region. So I'm very proud and thankful that the chairman of the board of Västra Götaland is here today to welcome us to this year's Ecsite conference. Welcome, Gertinge.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very honored that Västra Götaland has been chosen to host this year's Ecsite conference. This is a region where we do believe that dreams are the spirit of innovation. That whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can arise. The vision of Västra Götaland is the good life. The good life requires good health, stimulating jobs, access to education, good communications and culture. We want to be a good place to live and to work in, and I believe that we have come quite far. To accomplish great things, we must not only act, but also dream, not only plan, but also believe. 40 years ago, Gothenburg had one of the world's leading shipyards. Today, the shipyard has transformed into a center for information technology and telematics. 40 years ago, our neighbor city Borås was a center of textile production. Now, Borås has transformed into leading center for textile design. Success comes from improving and inventing, not from pushing what's not working. Earlier this year, the European Commission selected Chalmers University here in Gothenburg as the center for one of the two flagships of the largest Research Excellence Award in history, FET, Future and Emerging Technologies. Chalmers will be the center for the research and innovation founding program on Griffin, a material with a unique communication of superior properties and creatable starting point for new destructive technologies in a wide range of fields. The center will be important for future strengthening and the region as a dynamic and creative place for new ideas and new innovation. A place where we encourage young people to study, to engage in natural science, and to give them a chance to live up their dreams. Because the most conventional idea is sometimes the brightest idea. When Henry Ford was asked why he did not consult his customers, he said this: "If I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse." I wish you all creative and fruitful days in Gothenburg, and again, welcome to Västra Götaland. Thank you.
I have to start with the apology. I forgot to introduce myself when introducing Ken Glover. So I'm Robert Fimhofer, Director of Copernicus Science Center and President of Ecsite. So good morning again. Morning. As I glance around this beautiful conference hall, I can see, apart from the members of the audience, of course, many interesting objects: lamps, a microphone, projectors, balloons, laptop on some of your laps, and smartphones in some of your hands. In essence, there is nothing here that was not once just a dream, a mere product of the imagination of certain people who believed that those dreams would come true. We often treat dreams as a privilege of childhood, that carefree and idle time in our lives. As the Polish poet Antoni Słonimski once wrote in jest, "Children are a disgrace to humanity. As a social class, they are unproductive, parasitical, privileged, illness-prone, self-seeking, uneducated and ill-mannered, uncouth and dirty." To our irritation, children do not have to busy themselves implementing projects, securing subsidies, or especially handling all the related paperwork. Childhood full of dreaming and playtime seems to be a quite useless introduction to the productive and useful adult life. Yet the role played by a long childhood is akin to that served in our life, is akin to that served by the R&D department at a good company. As a toy with soap bubbles or fit together Legos, their heads way up in the clouds, children gather knowledge and continuously generate new, crazy ideas. A child's brain is like a map of Venice, with a vast number of connections all linked together in a complex way. As time passes, those narrow, winding streets begin to be replaced by less numerous but broader boulevards, like in Paris following Barnhausen's urban renovation. Cars speed along them much faster than the gondolas on Venice's canals. In adulthood, creativity partly gives way to effectiveness, but we still retain that astounding capacity to dream and imagine. Every one of us lives in many worlds at the same time. Our real one, here and now, in Gothenburg, as well as in parallel universes. These are our dreams and daydreams, our imagined ideas and hypotheses, the alternative realities that show us what the world might be like if it were not as it is now. Philosophers call this ability to create alternative realities counterfactual thinking, and children are excellent at it. Their imagination are full of whole planets of extraterrestrial civilizations, and their bedrooms are inhabited by dragons whose favorite food is, of course, strawberry porridge. Children have no trouble imagining that the world different than it actually is. The gift of dreaming would nevertheless remain just an empty game if it were not for our capacity to learn, to discover, to posit cause and effect links between the facts. It is precisely this combination of word knowledge with dreams about the different word that ultimately gives rise to a different word. And innovation becomes the measure of the strength of the dreams. Today, perhaps for the first time in the history of civilization, a moment has come when thinking like a child, keeping one's head in the clouds, and coming up with the out-of-this-world ideas has become a valued ability among adults. Being innovative nowadays improves our individual chances for success in our professional and private lives. It boosts the prosperity of our societies. Today we realize that the ability to innovate gives companies and economies a competitive edge, just like the ability to learn and imagine gave humans a competitive edge over other species. The classic model of an innovative environment is frequently described as a triple helix, demanding close-knit cooperation between the universities and research centers that generate new solutions, companies that take them to the market, and the governments that need to ensure the innovation-friendly conditions. However, this model would be incomplete without a fourth element, engaged citizens, who are not just passive consumers of innovative products, but actively contribute at each stage of innovation. They create knowledge, they initiate new solutions, work at the companies that implement them, and actively utilize them. Innovation thus becomes inclusive. It gains a strong social and civic dimension. This quadruple helix of innovation enables us to better perceive its deeper cultural significance. Innovation is not just about knowledge creation, the transfer of and diffusion of technology assisted by financial instruments and legal mechanisms. It is also a state of mind, an entrepreneurial spirit, a courage to risk failure, and a drive to create new things. It is culture that is nicely summed up by the mission of the Starship Enterprise in the Star Trek series, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Thanks to 3D printers and Arduino multicontrollers, the culture of innovation is now flourishing among communities of makers and do-it-yourselfers, offering many countries hope of soon seeing a new wave of industrialization. The hacker spirit, brashly treating every obstacle as just another challenge, is being embraced by more and more individuals among the young generation. Their boldness frequently stems from not knowing that a particular problem is unsolvable, not being aware of that received opinion, or simply not paying it any heed. They think creatively, outside the box. They then experiment until they find a solution to the problem. They thus confirm the aptness of Walt Disney's old saying, "All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them." Is innovation something that can be taught naturally? But doing so is not easy in education systems dominated by standardized tests, with penalties for making mistakes. The spirit of searching and experimenting, which naturally accompanies every innovation, does not always sit well within school walls. Perhaps the first target of innovation should be schools themselves, so that it should better encourage people's natural, not culturally imposed, urge to explore the world by observing and experimenting, and then to make their dreams a reality. And here I'm reminded of a very poignant statement by the Irish poet William Butler Yeats. In dreams begins the responsibility. That dreaming done by children may be carefree and innocent, but the dreams of an adult, together with a desire to bring them to life, carry the seeds of responsibility for the attendant consequences. This is yet another important component of the culture of innovation. And so what role in fostering innovation rightfully falls to science centers, museums, modern institutions of science communication? Without a doubt, we should be an integral part of the whole innovation ecosystem. We should stimulate curiosity, inspire, instill passion and interest, encourage open experimentation, and create space for thinking outside the box. We should couple together the freedom to dream with a sense of responsibility. We should highlight the potential of research efforts and open up to new social needs. We should revitalize our educational system, injecting a dose of creativity and scientific thinking. But we should also be concerned for the lifeblood of the innovative ecosystem, namely social communication, ensuring the vital link between all the important stakeholders. Because only together we can achieve new objectives. As Yoko Ono once aptly said, a dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is a reality. In closing, I would like to cite an ironic remark once made by Max Planck. An important scientific innovation rarely makes its way by gradually winning over and converting its opponents. What does happen is that the opponents gradually die out. If you do not want to wait that long, already now we should start to jointly foster the culture of innovation. Thank you. I would like now to introduce you to the very short movie. Last March, one of the landmarks of European science centers, Città della Scienza in Naples, Italy, burned to ashes. As you know, Città della Scienza is one of the leading actors on the European scene of science communication, and it's also one of the leading science centers and partners of Ecsite. This tragic event raised a huge huge wave of solidarity among not just the science centers, but also policymakers, civic society organizations, and research institutions. During the Ecsite annual conference, you will have the opportunity to discuss and offer our friends from Naples the support they need very much. I encourage you to visit Citta's booth in the Business Bistro. And now I invite you to watch a short movie presenting this tragic event.
È passato, ha visto del fumo e ha lanciato l'allarme. Nel giro di pochi minuti, alle 21:35, le fiamme avevano già avvolto completamente il
Città della Scienza non è fatta di mura, di attrezzature solo, anche quelle sono importanti, ma la cosa inalienabile è il sistema di competenze, è la squadra, è l'idea.
Ci andavo pochissime volte e quelle poche volte mi divertivo e mi imparavo cose nuove.
Mi sentivo male, mi sentivo triste e abbattuta, perché io da casa mia vedevo lo scheletro, non riuscivo proprio a guardare. Infatti quando ho scoperto che era Città della Scienza me ne sono entrata dentro perché non riuscivo a guardare che...
scienza, che fossero tante cose che fino a ora non abbiamo visto. Federica! Io per ricostruire la città della scienza metterei anche un mattone sopra l'altro, da solo, perché la voglio a tutti i costi.
Spero che offrano dei soldi per ricostruirla.
Ricostruiamo città della scienza!
Questa è una battaglia che dobbiamo combattere.
Chi ha fatto questo forse non poteva nemmeno pensare che si sarebbe scatenata un'armata pacifica e colorata come questa.
E ha sottovalutato la forza delle idee.
Dear colleagues, it was in March this year when this dark cloud burst out in Naples. But today in Gothenburg, we can change this black cloud into a white one, and we will do that. We will sit on that cloud and we will travel here to Ecsite, there in our minds, further in our dreams. Dreams, go back to sleep. I will not wake you up. I will speak very gently, so as not to awake you from your daydreams. I will let you dream your desires, for I am sure most of our dreams come from desire. Just as I'm sure innovation happens because a solution meets a desire. It fulfills the desire of someone else. One desire meeting someone else's desire. Well, if that's not called falling in love. From explosive and fascinating passions to slow, tender constructions, from gentle routine to new kinds of relationships, relationships between science, technology, and society, between science centers and museums and their publics, between an explainer and a young father. You fall in love, and when you're in love, there is you, there is someone else, and there is something happening between you two. The in-between is just as important as the two single entities. Without the in-between, there is no relationship, just two individuals standing side by side. Science is an entity, society another, and we, science centers and museums, are at the heart of the relationship between the two. Innovation will happen where we are, where we decide to be. But like any relationship, it is dynamic, in movement, never totally known. Einstein. Gravitation cannot be held responsible for people falling in love. We, science centers and museums, help people make sense out of their world, make them reveal their unknown interest for science and its value in daily actions. Science centers and museums want to have an influence, to make a difference. Stefan Zweig wrote, "Intellectual power, like physical power, comes from movement and change." And indeed, science centers and museums, we move. we dare, we create, skate on thin ice, sleep on a volcano. We sometimes tremble. It's wonderful to tremble, to question, to shiver. We will tremble, but we'll never fall. We will risk, but never fail. We will grow, but never be fat. We will sail and never fade. We'll never fade because our backbone is made of purposes and not of activities or facilities. We believe democracy is not only a procedure, it also has to be a quality, an approach. We wish to change the system, not the climate. We will always be there to show how science and technology, in both their reasonings and solutions, can reduce injustice and increase the quality of life of all human beings. You fall in love when you are well in your boots, when you know yourself, when you're genuine, when meaning prevails over superficiality. As science centers and museums, in every choice we make, every time we make a mistake, every assumption we shake, every snake we swallow, whenever we create, it's the meaning, the essence that keeps us awake, with, yes, sometimes a few headaches. How often are you in love with a child breaking your exhibit, but learning so much by doing so? In love with someone who picked your idea to create this fab lab out on a cloud, or with objectors out there in the street, manifesting against your exhibition or programs, because after all, this is democracy. Buckminster Fuller, architect, systems theorist, wrote, "The highest of generalizations is the synergetic integration of truth and love." You fall in love if you are open, listening, receptive, provoking and welcoming the unexpected, listening to our publics, setting up mechanisms where their voices are heard and amplified. At times, we research and collect these voices to convey them to policymakers. At other times, these citizens' voices come to us directly, influencing our programs, poking into our governance. Open, exploring sideways, thinking on the fringe, even on the fridge. Science centers and museums, we weave humanities, art, economics, sports, ethics with science and technology. We offer young and adults the chance to game their learnings, exhibit their emotions, touch upon the dialectics of an issue. The views of our publics widen, their thinking broadens, and they themselves become more receptive to others and to differences. Millions of visitors grasp that to implement solutions that will keep our planet safe and sound, one must understand and integrate different and sometimes conflicting views. Thanks to our work, millions of individuals listen, truly listen to each other, to hopefully live peacefully together. We provide conditions for the public to care for science and technology. But will it last? The Beatles sang, "All you need is love," but we also need visitors. Will this relationship be just a fleeting flame or a long-lasting affair? It will last if the initial emotion becomes a choice, a commitment, our commitment. If the public feels a sense of belonging, if like lovers they have fun, they argue and debate sometimes, but always come back. We do so much more than exhibitions. Our meaning is so much more than what is visible. What makes the desert beautiful, said the little prince, is that somewhere it hides a well. In romance, a little routine doesn't hurt, but a few surprises help. The Ecsite Conference 2013 is the same, carefully designed by the ACPC, whom I sincerely thank. But you will also experience wonderful surprises prepared by the dream team of Universium. Carina, Anne, and your whole team, I deeply thank you. The conference is the same and not quite. for you also create this conference. You give it its atmosphere, its reflective depth, its charm and zest. You are the soul of the conference. Now, I hope I didn't wake you up. Your dreams are as important as your reality. Gloria Steinem, political activist, wrote, "Without leaps of imagination or dreaming, we lose the excitement of possibilities. Dreaming, after all, is a form of planning." At this conference, dreams, reflections, and freedom will replace the usual realities of timelines, emails, and meetings. For the next 3 days, I invite you to love kinship, friendship, citizenship, leadership, and ownership. The nice, fluffy white cloud is yours. Create, please, again, this conference. There's a postscriptum. It says, "By the way, I love you all." Thank you, Ecsite Network.
People in the back, time for the shakers. And the balloons. Glow sticks. And finally, the bubbles.